Calm, focus, happy. Hey, Mindful Tribe, welcome back to the show. I'm here today with the president of the greatest interior landscaping company in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for him, being an interior landscaping person, I think is a very mindful thing, but we're going to talk to him about that and how mindfulness plays into what he does and into his world. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's a best-selling author on reducing stress in your everyday life. He's written a book on this, and he's also a certified laughter yoga leader. And so I'm really excited to tell you that I'm here today with Professor Pete Alexander. Professor Pete, are you in mindfulness mode today?
I am, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I really appreciate your listeners' time as well.
You're most welcome. It's great to have you here. What does mindfulness mean to you, Professor Pete?
For me, it really is being present with your own body and being able to take in and appreciate what's going on as, again, in the present rather than living in the past or worrying about something in the future. And it's interesting because when I was doing my research for my book, I found that most stress that we have that ends up being a negative in our lives happens because of ruminating in the past about something we cannot change, or having anxiety about something that may or may not happen in the future. But the reality is, I'm sure you've heard this, Bruce, the present is a gift, and that's why they call it the present. If we can just live in the present and be mindful of that, it's, everything else, it can be handled, relatively easily if we can just stay present.
That is so true. And the book that you wrote, Lighten Your Day, that is a book that really helps people with their stress so that they can quickly and easily relieve some of that stress. So can you give us a little bit of insight? What's one way we can quickly and easily relieve some stress from our life?
Oh, perfect. Yeah. When I started writing the book, I was looking at different books that were already out there to see how I could find a particular gap that there was. And the big gap that I saw was that most of the books were written with maybe one or two activities, and a 300-page book on like deep breathing or yoga or meditation. But the reality is, most of us don't have that kind of time. We
Right.
are stressed, and we've got only a couple of minutes before we have to go into a stressful meeting, having a stressful conversation or a perceived stressful conversation. So what I decided to do was offer up the vast majority of the well over 100 activities that are in the book are 5 minutes or less. So one that you ask is one of my favorites, is called visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And I can walk you right through it.
Oh,
For
please do.
the listeners, just keep in mind, the only thing I don't want you to be doing is driving a vehicle right now, because you're gonna close your eyes for a minute. But go ahead and close your eyes and take a deep breath in.
Oh, it feels good.
It does already. And what I'd like you to do is go in your mind to a place you like to relax. Call it your happy place. Maybe it's the beach, maybe it's the park, maybe it's a lake, maybe it's your backyard, maybe it's the spa, maybe it's your favorite recliner. Wherever it is, go there now and take in all of your senses. So, what do you feel? Do you feel the sun on your face? Maybe the sand or the grass under your feet? And what do you smell? Do you smell the fresh air? Maybe the lotion from the spa? Maybe you smell the popcorn you just made for your favorite movie. And what do you hear? Do you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Maybe the water splashing on shore? And what do you see? Do you see the blue sky? Maybe the green of the trees or the grass? Whatever it is, take it all in and take another deep breath in. and open your eyes.
Oh.
Simple grounding exercise. And like I said, other than in a driving vehicle, if you're the driver, this is something that you can do anywhere. And I have a lot of different people who at work, let's say they're in the office, and if they've got a cubicle, if they're able to do it in the cubicle, great. But I know people who actually will do this by just like going into the restroom, into a restroom stall or something, if they're in an open work environment, or they just go in outside for a moment. You could even do this standing up, but it's being able to do an activity that works for you. And if you do it regularly on a daily basis, the compound benefits will be amazing. You just have to do it every day. And that's where we need to get into a habit.
That's a really great exercise. Absolutely made me feel fantastic. That's for sure. So,
Glad.
Professor Pete, I know that you're into yoga and I know you're into laughter yoga, but when did you first get into yoga and what was that like for you?
Well, it basically for the laughter yoga part, that one actually I had experienced it for the very first time back in it was either 2015 or 2016.
Mhm.
And I remember what happened was I was walking in downtown San Francisco in the financial district, and I happened to come up to this park, and there were a bunch of people that were just laughing. And I thought, what is going on here? And so they invited me to come in, and so they were doing these, for the most part, ridiculous activities. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, these people have lost their minds. And then at the end of the class, the activity, the group, I realized, boy, I feel really good. And it was amazing. So I started doing a little bit of research on it, and I thought, wow, that's pretty fun. And at the time, the trainings were not online, and so I
Mhm.
thought, okay, maybe I could attend one. And then life kept on getting in the way. But it was not until 2020 that I decided I was going to get trained in this, because I wanted to offer it in my community, because I noticed that with all the negativity that's going around in the world,
Mhm.
having a way to be able to laugh and be able to have joy is something that I wanted to bring to others. And then, of course, right after I get certified, that's when COVID hit, because
Right.
I got my training in January
Okay.
of 2020,
Yeah.
and then my first class was supposed to be in March because I had the venue set up, and bingo, everything shuts down. And
Wow.
so yeah, but gratefully it's back up and running, and I'm really enjoying doing that. And it just it's amazing, as we were talking about before the recording. For me, I get to do these activities, leading these activities for an hour in the class, and it's amazing how I feel afterwards. It feels so good. And that energy lasts for several hours. Sometimes, it can last overnight to the next day. It's amazing what it can do. And then if you we were talking about making it a habit. So one of the goals that I have for the people who come to my class is that they learn activities, laughter activities, that they can utilize as they need during the week when something would normally get them agitated. And if we can teach ourselves to not let that agitation get to us, then we're not putting that negative toxicity into our bodies.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to hear about your TEDx talk.
Mhm.
What was it like becoming a TEDx speaker? Was that difficult to get into that space? And what was your talk about?
Sure. Well, it's funny that you say, what was it? Was it difficult? So I started with one particular topic, and my original application was in June of 2021.
Mhm.
And so I got rejected, rejected, rejected. And so then I thought, well, maybe I should change topics. So I changed topics to another topic,
Mhm.
rejected, rejected, rejected. And then I thought, okay. So then I changed it to one that was really very, very personal. Um, I have a extraordinary background of family dysfunction. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do a talk about this.
Mhm.
And what I noticed was at that point when I changed topics, I had been rejected probably, with the first two topics, 25 times roughly. And then I started applying with this family dysfunction topic. And every time I got rejected for that, it was as if I was getting punched in the stomach.
Oh, wow.
It really was because this was very, very personal. And so it was devastating each time. And after I got up over 50, it was like 51, 52 rejections. I decided, you know what? I either I'm going to quit or I've got to do something else. And I was out in nature hiking, my favorite pastime. And I had this topic come to my mind. And it was, wait a minute, how do people feel about getting rejected by TEDx? I know rejection is a very difficult thing that we all deal with. But, and there are several talks already on TEDx talked about rejection. Not
Mhm.
one talked about utilizing the TEDx experience as part of that.
Mhm.
So I thought to myself, let me see if I apply based on being rejected by TEDx and trying to overcome that. As I get rejected by on that topic, the one good thing that came out of that was each time I got rejected, it added data to my findings. And here's the funniest thing of all. When I would get rejected on that topic, each time I got rejected, I would just do a laughter exercise and I'd say thank you because you just gave me more data. And literally, I got rejected, so it totaled up to 89 times. And then my 90th application finally came through. And so I gave that talk on October 25th. And now I'm waiting for it to get published because it got submitted by the organizer early last week, I believe, because they have to put a little bit of editing
Okay.
in video. But it was one of, if not the hardest, one of the hardest speeches, presentations that I've ever had to do because um, when, in most cases, when you are selected as a TEDx speaker, you have to memorize your talk.
Yeah.
Now, I used to, anytime I give a presentation, I always practice it and I like to be very well prepared. However, I don't memorize my presentation. Of the probably 400 presentations I've given in my career, what I'll do is I'll have some slides. The
Sure.
slides are almost always just pictures, and those slides are only there for me to emphasize a point.
Mhm.
And I like to use a bit of improv because, I do improv comedy as well. And I like to do a bit of improv as, in terms of what's going on with my audience. So with a TEDx talk, when you have to stick to an exact memorized speech, that can be quite challenging because, I want to respond to the audience. And what happened actually during the talk, at one point, I made a point. I made a part of my speech, and there was something I did not expect on a positive side from the audience reaction. And I said something just out of habit. I said something, from an improv standpoint, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I just went off script. And so I had to get back on there, and I messed up one line after that because I was trying to get myself back on. But it was a really great experience. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity, and it's something that if anyone listening, if you've ever thought about doing a TEDx, I'd recommend applying because it can be a really really great opportunity to further expand getting out of your comfort zone, which it did for me. Whenever we get out of our comfort zone, we inevitably grow. And the interesting thing that a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't want to fail. Well, failure, if you think about what the fail as an acronym, it stands for fictional I'm sorry, fear, FEAR, fictional evidence appearing real. And if you think about that, it's our uh, classic inner critic that's telling us, oh, you can't do this because you're going to fail. And our inner critic is not our enemy, it's just trying to protect us. But when we extend ourselves, and let's say we run into a new roadblock because we're extending ourselves, it's basically the universe telling us that we need to try something different. It's not a failure. It's basically giving us feedback. And so being able to memorize a 10-minute talk and and do it in front of an audience and practicing it regularly, that was all a lot of work that I feel like I really grew from, as well as modifying the talk as I continued to practice it, where I actually learned some new things about myself that I brought into the talk.
Well, that's really interesting to hear that. And I'm looking forward to hearing your talk when it comes out on TEDx, especially knowing that background information. That's
Oh,
really, really
yes.
cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, it's interesting because with my dysfunctional family, um, the story typically revolves around my mom as the villain of the story.
Okay.
But in my TEDx, it actually came out where it was what role my dad had in it, which I rarely ever talked about. And so
Mhm.
that was part of the interesting thing when it comes to rejection.
Oh, I see. So you became president of the greatest interior landscaping company in the San Francisco Bay Area. Tell us about the mindfulness aspects of being involved in landscaping.
Yeah. So basically, I purchased a failing business back in 2005 after I was working for the second company in a row that got bought by its main competitor. And I just wanted to have a little bit more control over my future.
Mhm.
And so I decided to buy this landscaping business. And it only focuses on businesses, and it's plants inside of offices and lobbies, etc. The first year that I owned it, I regretted every moment of it.
Did you?
It's like it was so hard. I mean, the unfortunately, like I said, it was going downhill, and but I was able to get it level where we weren't losing business anymore, and then it started growing. And after a year, and has other than COVID, um, when that hit in 2020, we've been lucky enough to continue to grow every year. And what's great about the business is that when you bring in the plants, especially first time into an office, it creates this enormous buzz from the employees, and the person who had the decision maker who brings it in or agrees to have us service their
Mhm.
office. They get all these accolades, so it's always fun to do that. But the plants themselves, we are connected to nature. And when you have live plants nearby you, not only, it's the university research backs this up left and right about the fact that it reduces stress,
Hmm.
It cleans the air so that we're less likely to be in an environment where we're going to catch a cold, let's say, or a virus, etc. So there's and it what it does is when we have live plants there, we're connecting to nature. And when we can connect to nature, that's a natural stress reliever that helps us be more calm. And so all the statistics and all the research from the universities say that if you can have one or more plants in your environment, the likelihood is you're going to be healthier and you're going to be more productive. And so, especially when you're less likely to be sick, we all know, if you've had a really bad cold or the flu, etc. Boy, sometimes you just don't feel like doing anything other than lying in bed. Well, you can't be productive when you're doing that and not really good to those, that you love, etc. So, health is so important. And one of the ways to do that is to have plants in your environment, real plants. And so that's part of what's fun for me because it's a service that people don't think about because it's like, oh yeah, there's plants here.
Hmm.
They don't really give much attention to that. Now, of course, if when I took over the business, um, the previous owner wasn't doing a really good job of taking care of the customers. So I walked into some customers who the plants looked pretty sad.
Mm.
And that can have a negative if the
Yeah.
plants are failing. Um, that can have a negative of mindfulness on people, and so a lot of it could be just there's research that shows that if you're in a toxic environment, plants will reflect that. So, for example, there was this wonderful study where it showed that people would come and purposely argue next to one plant, same variety of plant, same size plant, etc. Everything else was kept the same. So one plant had to deal with all the toxicity. One plant got, feedback like, oh, you look good, or how you doing, blah, 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 positivity. And it was amazing after a month what one plant looked like versus the other.
That is
Crazy.
fascinating.
It is. It is. It just shows because plants are they're living creatures basically, and or they're organisms, and they respond to the negativity as well. So if we can if our arguing, if our toxicity can do that to plants, can you imagine what it's doing inside of us when we're allowing the worrying about something that we feel guilty about in the past or anxiety about something in the future, what it's doing inside of us? It's just,
Yeah,
it can be so,
totally.
so bad.
Totally. So, as a professor, do you teach mostly about marketing?
I do. I do. So I have the benefit of being able to inspire my students into creating marketing plans for a topic of their choice. So instead of, I took this class over back 3 years ago,
Hmm.
and the old format of it was students had to come up with different ideas for a widget, a generic widget, and they all had to do the same thing. And you could see the feedback that the students were giving. They were saying, this is boring. We don't get it. We don't have no connection to a widget. And so I decided, okay, pick something that you would like to do. So my students now, they'll pick either the company they're working for, an idea they have for a new product or service, a product that they really like that they want to help. And it's so fun to see them work on a project, and especially ones that these students, most of the students have never done a marketing plan before. And the comments that they say that when they first started the class, they had no idea that they could actually do a marketing plan. And then by the end of the class, they've got this work of art that they could use actually as part of an interview process. Some of my students have used to get promotions at work. Several students have created businesses around the marketing plan. So it's really fun to see them take this and really apply it to something that can make a difference.
Well, it sounds like you have such a fun and balanced life because you do all these different things we've been talking about.
Mhm.
What else do you do in your life for fun?
So two things. One, I mentioned that I'm an improv comedy performer.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So yeah, so I get to do that. We do at least one, sometimes two shows per month, all throughout where I live. There's probably a 60-mile radius, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of different theaters that we perform at. So that's one because boy, that you have to stay quick on your feet because it's
I
all about
guess.
listening. Yeah, it's all about listening. And the fun part is, once again, you take feedback and suggestions from the audience. So
Yeah.
every show is different for us. And
Yeah.
that's really fun.
And I have to ask, is this a marketing thing when you say we and for us? Because is there more than one of you standing up there
Yes.
or what?
Yes. So my troupe has 6 members,
Okay.
and so usually, depending on the activity, it'll be two of us, three of us, or the
Okay.
whole group. So that's why I say we, because
I see.
if I was I did see, I took my son to it several years ago. There was a one man. He did two different shows. One
Uh-huh.
man Star Wars show, one man Lord of the Rings show. Well, I shouldn't say I could never do that. I wouldn't try and do that because that is really hard.
Hmm.
But when you have the opportunity to work with talented professionals like I do, it's actually so much fun, especially when you get the audience laughing hysterically. That it's that
Hmm.
instead of the applause, that's the part that gets us really excited. So that's one. And then my favorite pastime is hiking. I absolutely love that sport. There's this connection that I have with nature,
Hmm.
but also, it's a wonderful opportunity to connect with others because, as you're hiking a trail, you're talking, and it's wonderful. It gives you the best combination that actually is something, when you can connect with others and you can be out exercising and you're in nature. Boy, those are three huge stress relievers all at once. So it's absolutely
Definitely.
fantastic.
Oh, that is amazing. Professor Pete, I always ask a question about bullying, and I wonder if you have
Mhm.
a story about that where mindfulness would have made a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's there's this activity that I like to promote to people if they've ever heard of it, called the stop um, uh, uh, activity, and the stop is a acronym for with the process that you should follow. And this happened to me. I tried this. I had when I was still working in corporate, there was a guy who he enormous narcissist. And literally every time I heard his voice, the hair on the back of my neck would stand up. I'm sure all of us have had somebody like that. It's just like, oh, and he would come, and unfortunately we had this open office environment, so there was not even a cubicle wall to block this. He would, and his desk was right next to mine, and he would just, out of the blue, he would just start saying stuff loud, and he didn't care, he didn't care that the rest of us needed concentration time or we were working on stuff. He just would blurt out stuff, and he would snap at you for certain things. And it was awful. And at one point, I was not having a good day. he he just rubbed me the absolute wrong way, where he just was basically telling me that one of the people that was working for me, that was reporting to me, made a mistake. And he was telling me how I had failed the company by hiring this guy. And my stress level, kind of like if you think about a thermometer, those classic things where it's going up, mine just was going, it was ready to go, will explode.
Yeah.
And I remembered the stop method. And so the stop method says stop, don't immediately react. Okay. T is take yourself away from the situation. So I did not respond to him. I just walked away and I actually went into the bathroom. And in there, I went into a stall and I just observed, which is the O. I observed my feelings, took several deep breaths, realized, okay, if I would have reacted immediately to him, it might have been a shouting match. I wouldn't have punched him or anything, but it might have been a shouting match. And if that was a shouting match, who is that going to help? It's certainly not going to help me because it's going to make me look like, somebody who can't handle, a difficult person like this. So I went through that process. It took probably 5-10 minutes. And then the proceed, you go back to the situation after you've collected yourself. And we all can have probably had a time where we said something, the words came out, and you knew as soon as the words came out, those are the wrong things to say. And you want to grab those words and throw them back into your mouth, but it's too late.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with a bully, it's just, don't, try not to, unless you have no choice, if somebody's physically assaulting you, that's one thing. But if it's just verbally, something like that, if you can use the stop method to help collect your thoughts, chances are you can come up with a better reaction once
Totally.
you've been able to collect
I
yourself.
love that
And
stop method.
yeah, so it's
That's
it's
really
it's
good.
yeah, it works. It really does. It's hard.
Totally.
The hardest part though is to realize when that thermometer is going up there,
Yeah.
you don't want to respond to that. And
No.
we're not talking just somebody you work with. It could be a family member for that
Yeah, for
matter.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. That is
Sure.
really, really powerful. Yeah. Professor Pete, as we move forward in the interview, I want to ask you 5 quick answer questions. So just
Sure.
30-second answers are perfect. The first one is this.
Okay.
Who is one person who has been a really powerful mindfulness person in your life?
Actually, it was a professor I had
Oh.
back when I was getting my bachelor's degree,
Mhm,
and we were talking about industrial relations, which was quite boring,
mhm.
but the way that he presented it, he got us to think. And when you think, that's the mindfulness. And so to me, some of the things that he taught me, and this is, 40 years ago, I still apply today. So even before a mindfulness was a regular thing for me,
Yeah,
so I give him a lot of credit for that.
that is really great. How has mindfulness helped you deal with your emotions differently?
Oh, well, perfect example. I used to just react immediately and usually in a negative way.
Mhm.
And so mindfulness now for me is going back to being in the present. And I have a note on my monitor that basically reminds me, do not believe your thoughts. Because if we get wrapped up in all of our emotions, we potentially are going to say the wrong thing. And so being mindful and being present, it helps. It really does. And you don't, going back to what we said earlier, we say the words wrong, can't get them. It's too late.
Yeah, it is too late. We can't take them back. Professor Pete, your book, Lighten Your Day,
Mhm.
is really a great book. And I encourage Mindful Tribe, I encourage you to get your hands on this book because it will lighten your day. It will make your life less stressful. But are there any other books, Professor Pete, that you would recommend that are related to mindfulness?
Yes, actually, there is one that in particular that I really, really liked, that is about mindfulness, and it talks about trust. And the I'm trying to remember what the exact title of it is. The power of trust, the power of trust.
Okay.
And so what the author talked about is all the things we can do from a mindfulness perspective to gain trust in others. Because the organizations that can build trust with their customers and the individuals who can build trust with others, whether it's coworkers, our personal relationships, etc., those are the people, those are the organizations that are going to be way more successful. Because one of the most powerful things about trust is referrals. And if, like, let's say, Bruce, I had a product or service that I really liked, and I said to you, Bruce, you should check this out. You are way more likely to check it out than the than if you see an advertisement, for example,
Yeah.
because I've done the selling for you. So
Mhm.
it's actually, I just remember, it's the speed of trust. That it's not the power of trust, it's the speed of trust.
Okay.
And so that book I'd highly recommend, because it gives so many different examples of what you can do to build trust relatively easily in at least your own life from a mindfulness perspective.
Okay, the speed of trust. We'll put
Yep.
that in our show notes at mindfulnessmode.com. The
Yeah.
speed of trust. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, are there any apps of any description that you would recommend?
It's funny. The One of the things that I find is really important about being mindful is using your mind. And I actually find, I don't know if you've tried Duolingo before to learn a new language.
I haven't used that. No.
Yeah, I do it every morning for
Hmm.
5 minutes. And it's really important for us to, especially as we get older, to utilize our mind regularly. And so Duolingo is really good because it gives you a 5 minute exercise, and it does different things to help you pick whatever language you thought you might be interested in using.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I've been doing Spanish, and it's like I did Portuguese before I went to Portugal earlier this year, and I didn't think I was going to use it. And then all of a sudden, wow, I'm in the environment that's using this language, and the stuff that I learned, it all is there. I just, I'm not using it on a daily basis here in the US, but when you're actually in an environment that utilizes that language, it's amazing. So I would highly recommend. There's a free version of Duolingo, and give it a try. And it gives your brain that exercise that helps us keep it fresh.
That's a good tip. I'll have to use that for Spanish too, because we're going to be going to Peru. So
Oh,
that,
fun, fun.
that would be
Yeah.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Try it
sure.
out. I mean, it's an easy app, and it's not just, okay, repeat after me. You're either talking to it, you're typing into it, you're reading, you're listening, whatever it happens to be. So it's a really good app.
Well, that's fantastic. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on breathing that you could share with us?
Yes. So it's interesting. I like to call it the box method.
Mhm.
So if we think about a square, what to do for deep breathing, it's like, okay, we can do deep breathing where you breathe all the way in, and you make sure that if you can breathe out through your mouth, that's always most beneficial.
Yeah.
But also, when you think about the box method, try and at least count to 4 or 5 when you breathe in, then 4 or 5 when you breathe out.
Hmm.
Breathe in, but for 4 or 5, breathe out for 4 or 5. And it's only 2 times each. But if you do that, that's automatically when you start getting calmer. And so, when we did the visualization exercise earlier, I had you do a deep breathe in, and then a slow deep breathe out. And then I said, I want you to go in your mind to a place you like to relax.
Hmm.
You automatically start breathing slower that way. And it's most likely you're going to be doing it in about 4 seconds, 5 seconds at the most transitions. So think about it as a box.
Yeah, great suggestion. As we wrap up the interview, Professor Pete, are there any last final words of advice? Because you've given us a lot of advice on this discussion, but do you have any final words of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I have one that I always like to pass on to anyone who wants to really take it to heart. Don't trade your career or any major responsibility. Don't don't trade your health for that, because that's what I did. I was working very, very hard. I had all these different responsibilities that were bringing me down stressfully. And I ended up getting stress-induced diabetes. And the problem is, when you have a chronic disease like that, you can never get rid of it.
No.
And so if you trade your health for your career, that's a very bad trade. And so don't take your health for granted. It's just not worth it. It's not. Think about it as, if we were going to trade money for something, would you feel like you got ripped off? Well, if you trade your health for your career or for other responsibilities, you are selling yourself short because you're shortening your lifespan.
Yeah, you truly are. And you really went into detail in your book about that. Thank you
Mhm.
for writing the book and putting it out there because it was really easy to read, really easy to digest, and you're just such a great communicator. So I really appreciate your book, Lighten Your Day.
Oh, thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, you have a terrific rest of your day. And thanks again for being on mindfulness mode.
Well, the pleasure's been mine. And I thank you so much, Bruce, for having me on the show. And once again, thank you to your listeners for all of their time.
For sure. Bye now.
Bye bye.